Good evening. I think it's time to get started, shall we? So much to do in so little time tonight. But I've got an idea, and that's all I ever need. There's my good friend Will. How's it going, Will? says he finally got back into the groove for school. That's good. Glad to hear that. Oh man, that sounds rough. Yeah, I had previously had some issues. I mean, I thought I was getting my sleep schedule back to normal, and then it turned out, I had one or two nights where I didn't get to sleep as early as I should have, and it kind of threw the rest off. I don't know if that's it's a different kind of thing than what you've got, what you're going through, of course, but I've also been having trouble sleeping, trying to mitigate that with some other things, mainly spending as much time physically active as possible, and then just kind of exhausting myself that way, which is probably not the healthiest way to do it. Or maybe it is, I don't know. I'm exercising a lot, which I need to get back to doing because everyone on quarantine right now, or everybody on lockdown right now, is either gotten really fit or really the other thing. I prefer not to get too much of the other thing. So when I'm not doing this, trying very hard to be active, you manage to lose weight somehow, then you're one of the lucky ones. Because I have a feeling for a while in July, I wasn't feeling that great. I wasn't going out as much. And when you're not working, and you're not going out and doing anything else, because you can't, there's really two things left to do. Well, three things. One is sleep. If you're me, one is sleep. Two is spend money. And three is eating. Boy, do I not want to do that. Do not want to get in the habit of doing that. So as I usually do when I'm painting something, I'm gonna end up being mostly loose with the pencil artwork and let the paint do most of the work when I have a chance. Because there's a lot of stuff that's going to end up going into this. At least I hope so. That is, as they say, the plan. Now, we've got something basic here. Without any further ado, and for a split second I forgot that my paints were right here. I'm going to try to move these in a little bit closer so you can see them on camera. As a matter of fact, I guess that's as good a time as any to move the camera over to the left, and now you can really see it much better. That'll work. That allows there to not be too much dead space on the camera view here. What I decided I wanted to do today, and I don't always like giving away exactly what I'm going to draw right away. If you're eagle-eyed, you can probably spot it already. But what I decided to do was my last artwork from Tuesday was kind of dark and kind of gloomy and kind of cloudy, and that's perfectly fine because that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I was feeling at the time, and that was the general atmosphere outside my door on that day. Today I want to do something completely different. I want to do something as colorful as I can get it with what I got to work with right now. And it may not seem that way right this minute, but it will. This also allows me to not have to worry too much about screwing anything up, because there's going to be plenty of time to fix anything that I don't get quite right away. Finished project from Tuesday is badass. Thank you. And hope it's only gonna get better from here. And for anybody else that's watching, Will and my other good friend Liz have been helping me to get this stream online ready, and been helping me test everything. And I was joking because one of the limitations that I have right now is this is about as close as I can get my camera without attaching it to the table, which I don't want to do because I move around a lot and I shake the table a lot when I move, and I do not want to have the table shaking constantly. Even thinking about that seems very annoying and disorienting for me, so I can just imagine how it would be to somebody who's actually watching me. Don't want to do that. I actually even tucked the tuck the cord from the webcam behind a book that's off to the right, that is not touching the table at all, so that I can do this all day. But when I stop the table, the camera doesn't shake. I can do this all day and the camera won't shake because it is in no way touching any part of the table right now. And that's how I wanted to get it. So it's not the most ideal setup in the world right now, but this is about as good as I can get it for the time being. And in time, I'll probably set up something else where I can get the table, or I can get the camera a little bit closer, or I may not need to, because I was sort of only half joking a couple of days ago when I told both Will and Liz that if I had to, I would just get a bigger sketch pad. Well, guess what I bought yesterday? I kind of decided I wanted to draw a little bit bigger anyway. Not too much bigger, for the simple fact that I want to be able to immediately scan all of this stuff as soon as I'm done with it. And my scanner still only does 8.5 by 11 size maximum. And Liz is here. Hey, Liz. The challenge here is going to be and believe me, I'm as tired of going on and on about it as anybody. But the challenge tonight is going to be, the challenge of this is going to be making what I'm trying to do work with some limited materials and limited color ability. Yeah, it looks like a good size, because remember, I think I told you guys at the last minute before the first stream, I decided to raise the table way up higher than it was any of the times that we had tested. I got so worried that the camera was too far away from the. I got so worried that the camera was too far away from the table that I raised the table up. And then just decided to move. I had a desk chair that I've been using for my computer desk, which is normally in my bedroom, and I moved it here to the drawing table, which is right outside my bedroom. And this may end up just being, this actually will end up being my permanent drawing table chair, which is fine. It's a perfectly good chair, and it probably works better for this table than it did for my computer desk. And my new chair is on its way. or at least it will be very soon. My new desk chair for my computer. For when I'm not in front of this table and I'm in front of the other table doing other things. Now comes the tricky part, I think. The tricky part here, I think, especially for these particular paints, is blending dark color into maybe not necessarily lighter color, but certainly brighter color, and then back into dark color, and making it all look like it's not overpowering anything, like nothing is overpowering anything else. I mentioned on Tuesday, I don't like using true, like full-on black paint unless I have to, unless it's for a very specific reason, because when I draw solid black, I prefer to do that with ink, and that's what I'm going to do here, which is why I haven't gone completely full black yet with the paint. I'm mixing it with, in this case, blue and purple, and my other colors, my other brighter colors here. Luckily, it's starting to look like what it's supposed to look like already. That's a good sign. And you hear me say that a lot because a lot of times I'll have an idea in my head of what I want to make, what I want to draw, or what I want to paint, but I'll never be quite sure that it's going to look the way that I want it to look until I actually do it. There's always a chance that my imagination will outweigh my abilities, and I will end up with something not at all like I had planned. So far, so good. Most of the time, I can at least BS my way out of that. It's also the benefit of using watercolor paint. And in my case today, picking a subject that kind of lends itself to not having an especially concrete physical form to draw reference from, and we will see what I mean shortly. Now, of my two good friends in this chat right now, I don't think Will has ever seen me draw anything in person, or, you know, because, well, I've never met Will in person. I don't think he's ever seen me draw anything live unless you happen to have checked out some of the Instagram videos. Liz, however, has seen me draw stuff live because one time I did it in front of her. And we happened to have been at a restaurant at the time. Yeah, I know. I was drawing in crayon. I've really come up in the world now, haven't I? You know what? Eventually I'll probably do something in crayon here too, because why not? I will draw something in actual crayon. I mean, I have nice, nice adult crayons, I have nice oil pastels. That's another bit of art supply that I need to get away. Oh yeah, that's right. I did used to draw online. Quick backstory: me and Liz and Will all became friends because we got together through a Facebook group for fans of Mystery Science Theater 3000, and we still hang out from time to time. We still hang out on a fairly regular basis online and watch cheesy movies, the worst that we can find. And we do that fairly regularly, so but yeah, I used to, from time to time I would draw stuff on the back when, in the olden days of 2017 and 18, back when Rabbit was a thing, or as much of a thing as it ever was, which isn't saying much. And it was a lot easier to sort of just host your webcam while you were watching stuff on that site. Quite a bit easier than what we're working with these days. But like I always say, we do what we can. And we still have good times. It's certainly been a bright spot in these past couple of months where the social interaction has been to a bare minimum for a lot of us. Is it a lot better than Rabbit? Yeah, I would think so. I would hope so. That's the stuff. That's what was missing, wasn't it? Hey. Had no idea I was gonna do that. Had no idea that was gonna work at all till I did it. It's the kind of experimental improvisational crapshoot that you can come to expect from me. It's working. What's not working is that color's blending a little bit too far in the wrong direction. I don't want that. But I may be powerless to stop it for now. So you just blend up for the time being. Blend up, blend down. See, this is what always gets me in trouble every time. Now, anybody that's seen this from Tuesday will know, but you guys are watching for the first time, and for this, I will be muting the microphone in just a minute. But yeah, remember a while ago when I told you guys I accidentally tripped a breaker in my apartment? Well, here's why. Yeah, make no mistake, hair dryers, for the most part, in my humble opinion, suck. I can have that opinion because my hair is like a 1/4 inch long, so... And I should stress it's a 1/4 inch long after a month, which should give you an idea of how short I usually keep my hair, or at least for the past couple of months I've kept my hair. But you know when hair dryers don't suck? Exactly just now. Now the idea here... That's right, modern problems require modern solutions. Now the idea here is to start going from shapes, or to start going from vague splashes of color to something more closely resembling shapes. Or at least something somewhat more identifiable as a shape as you go farther up. and having that shape be a little bit more ambiguous and going back down into more of that abstract splash of color as you get to the bottom. And let's see how that goes. Another thing is I'm also comfortable saying the other reason another reason I don't talk about as much about why I don't like using straight up black watercolor paint is because I don't really like straight up black watercolor paint, because black watercolor paint in my experience rarely dries black, or as black as I'm used to. No matter what, unless you have a very good black paint, which I don't, this stuff tends to just dry kind of gray. And that's not exactly what I need down here. But yeah, going back real quick to the hair dryer, I didn't realize, because, you know, like I said, I've kept my hair short most of my life. Even in recent years where I've been kind of sort of growing it longer, I don't dry it with a hair dryer. So I've never really had any need to use one. So I've never really had any real idea of how much power it pulls. Until a couple of weeks ago on a Sketchbook Saturday sketch, I tried using it to dry off some paint on my sketchbook while the air conditioner was running in one room, a dehumidifier was running in the other room, the computer was on, a couple of lights were on, and about 4 or 5 seconds after I turned the hairdryer on, everything shut off. I was not happy. But then again, that was mostly my fault. So I will cop to that being a direct result of my ignorance and inexperience with hair drying appliances. Yeah, luckily, you know, luckily, this being a small apartment, it only, you know, all of the most of the lights, actually I think all of the overhead lights were on the same circuit breaker, and it just tripped that, and the breaker's in my kitchen, so all I had to do was just turn it back on. It was not that big a deal, but it kind of freaked me out for a second, because I always worry that it's a much bigger problem than it is at the time. Yeah, that would have been another. That would have been another problem. Is that luckily it wasn't. It wasn't dark. It was getting dark, but it wasn't completely dark when that happened. So it was. The sun was kind of going down, but it was fine. Like I could see where I was going. I could see where everything was. It was still light enough inside the room, inside the place to be able to see what the heck I was doing. Now, a little bit of experimentation here. This may prove to be completely useless, or it may be a thing that I will later use to death. Yeah, there's some potential there. But really, probably work better if I just do this. Or, and give me just a moment. I'm gonna get something that I was hoping to not have to use right now, but we'll see. Now, what I did previously was hit that off, wet everything on the page, and hit it with a Q-tip to see if I could lift some of the color off. That works okay, but very slowly. And one thing about me, I'm really impatient. So, I'm gonna do what I've done previously and hope that works at this sort of accelerated stage of what I'm doing. Well, let's find out. Now, for anybody that's actually going to try this, it works, but make absolutely sure you have something with you to clean this surface off and all other surrounding surfaces as soon as you're done, because the last thing you want is for all of this stuff to be all over your workspace when you're not using it for this exact purpose that I'm using it for right now. We're gonna mute again, and we're gonna dry again. And you want to know what a pain in the butt that is? I was still cleaning this stuff off of the table this morning from when I did it on Tuesday. Two things for cleaning. And if you don't want a lot of unnecessary smears and droplets and marks all over your page, my suggestion is to make sure that this is all dried completely. Scrape it off, sweep it up. These are the small details they don't tell you about in art class. Or if you're a complete goober like me and you actually went to art school. Pardon the shaking of the table. Honestly, I should be doing this with a be right back screen too. Nobody on earth needs to see me sweeping my drawing table off. And when you're pretty sure that your surface is as smooth as you can get it, and in case anyone's curious, how do you remove the paint from your table? Well, when it comes to paint that's on my table, first of all, this right here, this is paper underneath it from just a plain old ordinary paper bag. I'm using that to sort of keep the residue on my table to a minimum, and I usually do that. But if you get paint directly on your table, alcohol is one way, but alcohol is just as corrosive for the finish on your table as it would be for the paint that you're trying to get off of it. So I wouldn't really recommend that unless you're, using it sparingly. And it really kind of depends on what kind of paint you're using. Watercolor paint, you can usually wet it up and kind of sponge it off. It may leave a stain on, depending on what kind of surface you use, what kind of table surface you have. It may, because watercolor is sort of semi-permanent, and the substance can come off, but the pigment will remain. My best suggestion for that is, if you're really worried about getting your table completely cleaned off as far as watercolor paint, do it as soon as possible, and you can use regular soap and water. And if you do it as soon as possible before the pigment really sets, usually you can get it out with soap and water. If you wait too long, it's going to be a little bit harder, and if you wait too long, you're probably going to stain it for good. Acrylic paint and Oil paint, like, oil paint is kind of the same deal where instead of soap and water, you just use paint thinner. But just like the watercolor paint, the pigment will stain if you're not quick about it. Acrylic paint is even easier because acrylic paint dries hard. I'm talking about oil paint. Acrylic paint is easier because it basically dries hard. So the best, if you wait a little bit too long and you get acrylic paint on your drawing surface, if your surface is smooth enough and you're careful enough, you can kind of scrape it off. You have to be very careful if you don't want to scratch up your table. But it is possible, and I do that often. But then again, there's all kinds of scratch marks on my table as a result. Not a whole lot of paint. Not a whole lot of dried paint on my surface, on my table. But if you're quick enough, you can usually scrape acrylic paint off and without staining it, without staining the table. And the same goes for, which is a bigger problem that I have with, my drawing table and painting, is getting tape residue off of my surface of my table. Tape residue I struggle with a lot more than the paint. I don't get a whole lot of paint on my table or even ink. When I get ink on my table, it's the same deal like acrylic. If it dries, you can scrape it off. Tape residue, you have to scrape off. Because if you're using decent tape and you have managed to get it, if you're using tape that's worth a damn as far as being sticky, and you're using it to, and you're trying to get the glue off of the table, whatever kind of chemicals you use will do more damage to the table than it will to the tape and to the glue of the tape. So your best solution is get really good with a flat razor or something similar, and basically, it makes a horrible, horrible sound. One of the worst sounds your ears will ever hear. But that is the way that you do it. That is the way that you get it. That's the way that I do it anyway. I always like to preface all of these little art tips with this is what works for me. I've been doing this for a long time, but I don't consult with too many people, so it's entirely possible that somebody else has a much better solution for what I'm advising or what I'm being asked to advise. I'm gonna move this again. Almost had another incident just now, and if Liz is still around, if you can hear me, I almost had another paint water incident. And Will, you do painting too. You should know you know what I'm talking about. That has got to be like the third or fourth time this week that's almost happened to me. And I've got nobody to blame but myself because I'm putting my drink way too close. Alright. Is this dry? Is this dry? Most importantly of all, I believe it can be drier. One more time. I'll get back to that in just a minute. Muting for a moment. Now, Will says, I've seen a lot of painters who keep labeled mugs for paint water versus drinking stuff. That's a good idea. If, and only if, you're actually looking at what you're dipping your paintbrushes in versus what you're drinking out of. If you're sort of absently reaching to your right for the general area of where something is, yeah, you're still gonna have an issue. I'm still going to have an issue. We're as dry as we're gonna get over here, so I think it's time to start inking. Wonder how your table setup would perform with a layer of butcher paper protecting it. Butcher paper is a little bit too smooth. What happens with that and why I would be reluctant to use it is that, as you can see, there's all kinds of paint running off of my page. What I usually use that I don't have any of right now and I haven't had for a while is newsprint. That's what I usually put behind me when I know I'm gonna be painting and I'm gonna make a big, gigantic mess. And this, like I said, is why I prefer leaving the areas that will ultimately be pure black for me to do by ink instead of paint whenever possible. It's important, like I said, on Tuesday, and will probably continue to say many times, to sort of create these rules for yourself, and then just the thing about that is the rules you create for yourself for each particular bit of artwork that you're doing, you have to be prepared to follow the rules that you've created for yourself. If you're breaking your own rules on your same piece of artwork, it's going to be noticeable. For example, all of these places that are supposed to be, all of these places down here that look like they're pure black, or look like they're supposed to be pure black, but I'm actually going to go over with ink. I've already clearly defined what pure black is in this piece, and it looks like this. Anything else is going to register to the human eye as not as dark as this right up here. So if I intend for this to be the same black as this, it's going to look going to look inconsistent. And you are correct, Will, and I will follow up with that in just a minute. Now, as a lover of all things comic books, I gotta keep coming up with some, ideas that'll be recognizable to people, but not too repetitive. I did the Tuesday stream, and I was very, very interested in keeping it, from my first stream, keeping it Spider-Man related. That combined with the fact that I will almost certainly be doing something Spider-Man related on Saturday for my first Sketchbook Saturday sketch in my new sketchbook means that for this Tuesday stream I wanted to do something very different. Now, what can I do that's as different from Spider-Man as possible but still somewhere in the realm of comics? Well, I decided to go with Sandman. Now, Liz says, I guess acrylic is the best paint medium for getting a dark black. Not always the case. There are plenty of deep black paints, or deep black watercolor paints. There's just none on this table right now. I don't want to keep going on and on about how my paints suck. I think I've made that point fairly clear, and I'm doing, I'm working with what I got, and I don't want to keep making that the problem of any of my friends who are watching, any of you guys. That's a problem that I plan to solve very, very soon. I'll show you guys later. There's or if you remember, there's a piece that I did about a year ago. It's on my Instagram, but it's the big piece that I did of Voltron, which is about this big, maybe bigger. And I did all of that using all of my, some of my best stuff that I had accumulated over the years. And that was one of the first big pieces that I ever did using a lot of gouache watercolor. Gouache is intended to be a very opaque watercolor so that it gets all of these really cool blending effects, but only after you pretty well saturate it. The other reason I decided to go with Sandman today is from something we had all been talking about just yesterday, and that was the Sandman audio dramas that are on Audible. Which I fully intend to listen to very soon because I'm dying to hear them. It's been a while. Something else that I feel like I've been talking way too much about lately, or is just that all of my comics and all of my graphic novels had been boxed up and in storage for 2 years, so I didn't really have a chance to really read any of that stuff, any of my favorite stories for a while, until recently. Now they're very close to me. As a matter of fact, they're right above my head right now on my bookshelves, right above this drawing table. And right before we started, I started flipping through. Let's see if I can get a good look at this. I started flipping through volume 1 of Neil Gaiman's Sandman. And I forgot just how much I love this comic. Even the first issue and what sort of sets everything all in motion. This original first issue is, of course, written by Neil Gaiman, who wrote the entire series, wrote the entire Sandman series, and drawn by Sam Keith and Mike Dridgenberg. And for a lot of people, I was a little bit late to the game on Sandman. I started reading pretty well after the whole series had ended, but I tried to catch up as soon as I could. And it's basically, it basically details, the first issue anyway is the story of how the Lord of Dreams is imprisoned by humans for 80 years. And we find out later on what becomes of basically his kingdom and the land of dreams and the act of dreaming among human beings and all living things during that time of imprisonment, and what has to be done and what has to happen when he is freed. That's about as much as I want to get into as far as what happens. Anybody that hasn't read it, for God's sake, please go read Sandman. If you've already read it, read it again. It is all good. It is all some of the best, long form comic book storytelling you'll ever read. Now, let me see if I can dry this a little bit without getting it to bleed through. Just the slightest bit of, yeah, there we go. That'll work. That's about what I was going for. See? I can be subtle. Maybe not that. Maybe a little bit more subtle than that. And I have a feeling this bad boy's drying up too, because I can see through the. I don't know if you can see this. Probably not. But I can see through the little window that shows how much ink is left. And when you can see through it, that means there's not a whole lot left. see. Eventually I'm going to stop using the Sharpie for these big black areas because as quick and efficient as Sharpies are, as quick and efficient as Sharpies tend to be, they don't age well at all. For the sake of being kind of quick today, I'm letting that slide. Also, because if absolutely necessary, I can always come back and touch this up later myself, even though I may not necessarily want to. You know what? This is going to have to dry completely. As much as I hate to do this and keep doing it. Gonna mute for a second. That's the stuff. Yeah, I needed that to be completely dry for what I was going to do next. Which is this. Now Liz says it's always sad when you can see the ink going away, and that's true. It's a little bit like saying goodbye to a friend. But luckily I've got more than one of these. At least I think I do. I'll have to do some looking, and if not, I can always order more. This is where things start getting a little bit interesting. And I think this ink up top is dry enough to start getting rid of these miscellaneous pencil lines as well, which are bugging the crap out of me. No, I guess it wasn't early enough. Ah, that sucks. This is something that I mentioned earlier. I know exactly what pen that's from. And every time I use it, I know something like that is going to happen. I know I'm going to end up going back over it in some way or another, for some reason or another. And it's going to end up smearing all over the place. Yeah, this jerk right here. I swear I could draw something with this pen. I could ink something with this pen. I could dry it in a kiln, take it out, and still be able to smear it. Very frustrating. It takes forever to dry. I thought I had dealt with pens before that were like slow drying. That's nothing compared to the ice age it takes for that particular pen to dry, and how many other things that I've done that have gotten ruined by it. And Liz says punk ass. But Liz also, I think you were talking about this pen. This one, the pocket brush. Is this the one you were saying that you liked? This one right here. It does some beautiful things. I can't lie. It's a little bit fussy because it's refillable. So, especially when, as you can see, this also starts getting empty. That's when, you know, this brush tip starts doing some funky things that are sometimes they end up looking kind of cool, but most of the time they'll end up doing, you know, some things that are unpredictable, and you don't always want that when when you're going for a particular effect at a particular time. And also I've gone, you know, I've replaced the ink in this particular pen so many times that as smooth as this is probably looking to you guys right now, I think this brush has just about had it. And luckily and Liz says, I wonder if the ink has a poor mixture and that's why it gets funky at the end. I'm not sure. It's possible. It's certainly possible. Because that's a notoriously common thing with all kinds of drawing inks, is that even among the same brands and the same, you know, even among the same brands from the same manufacturers that come, you know, that are sold at around the same time in the same places, sometimes the consistency can be really inconsistent. The consistency of the ink can vary a lot, much more than, you know, than would seem possible from ink that presumably is supposed to be coming out the same batch. But it does. It's a big time pet peeve among a lot of artists that work with ink and work with India ink and calligraphy ink as well. Yeah, I think I'll actually go for a straighter line here. I think that looks a little bit cooler to me. I'm gonna do something else over here momentarily anyway, so now I think you guys have read Sandman before, so you know, you have an idea, even if it's been a while, you have an idea of the general aesthetic of the book and what it's generally about and what it generally looks like, and the idea that it can really look like anything, given the type of story that Neil Gaiman was trying to tell. So with that in mind, we'll go to the audience participation portion of the stream. Now I've already done this part in black. I've already outlined this pretty nicely. I think I like how that's come out so far. Now I could outline the other part of this robe, or I could leave it the way it is and leave it kind of abstracted and amorphous and you know, much less with a much less defined form than this side. Yeah, I thought you'd say that. I thought you guys might say say that. I'm actually kind of glad you said that. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna leave it. I may, brighten up these colors then, if I can. Once again, I may be limited, but we'll see. Never tell me the odds. You want this to be as bright as I can get it, which means I may have to go over it quite a few times before it will. The other thing about this particular kind of watercolor paper is it's really absorbent. It sucks up, it sucks up the water out of the paint pretty quickly. What it leaves behind is sometimes not enough, really. That's a major difference in the quality of watercolor paints, is that it gets sort of, to make it, you sort of mix the pigment in with water or an agent that is water soluble, and that's what makes it react with the water and allows you to do the effects that you commonly associate with watercolor paint. Now, when that agent evaporates, you're mostly left with the pigment. And if you're using a cheap watercolor medium, you're working with much more water and much less pigment, which leads to the colors then, looking kind of dingy sometimes, which is what I'm fighting against right now. Hopefully that'll dry sometime this week. In the meantime, we're gonna go with some markers. This is my first use of markers on this stream anyway. I'm not gonna go into a whole lot of marker usage, just because the paints the paints are doing their job for the most part anyway. What I'm going to use them for is to sort of smooth over the blunder of that stupid pen, and give a little bit of shading to Morpheus over here. Not a lot. just enough to give you the idea that this is meant to at least resemble a person with a physical form, in so much as Morpheus is ever capable of having a physical form. Anybody that has read Sandman in the past knows that for Morpheus and the Endless, which are his other siblings, having a physical form is really very much optional for them. And what kind of physical form they have, if any at all, is really sort of up to their own discretion at any given time. There's a Sandman story called Season of Mists, where we're first introduced to, well, not first, but I think we're introduced to all 7 members of the Endless all together. They're in the same place at the same time for the first time in centuries. And Neil Gaiman kind of pauses to describe each one of them and sort of their characteristics and what they appear like to human beings for the most part. And that's one of my favorite descriptions of all of them, was the description of Dream, who's also known as Morpheus. He's commonly known as Dream, but he has many names given to him by many people who believe him, to be one thing or another. But yeah, one of my favorite things was a description of Dream where it says, almost like a footnote, it says Dream casts a human shadow when it occurs to him to do so. That really kind of says a lot without saying a whole lot. For here. There we go. Another thing I also like is, and I try to remember because I notice not every artist really remembers this, but one thing about Dream that that he's described as is being really kind of almost abnormally thin. And when anytime I draw a Dream, I try to play that up as much as I can. Now, I'll do some of this. These are my other, these are my ballpoint pens. And up until across the room in a fit of rage. Oh, no, yeah. Up until I met this jerk right here, these were the reigning and defending champions of pens that took the longest time for them to dry. But like I said, these have nothing on this one. These I can work with. These don't smear nearly as much. And Lindsay's here. You have an opportunity to meet some of my other friends. Friends, Will, Liz. This is Lindsay. Lindsay, this is Will and Liz. Everybody make friends, or I'll turn this stream around and head back home. Too wise. Too wise, Liz. She hates that. This is what happens when you get into this accelerated stage of working on something, or at least it does if you're me, and that's your workspace gets cluttered and full of everything, and then it becomes very difficult to find anything. Touch this up. Now, if you guys are eagle-eyed enough, if you've watched me draw enough, maybe I'm just kind of projecting, maybe I'm not giving this vibe off at all, but I certainly feel as though I am. What I'm actually doing right now is I'm kind of stalling, because I've got a big old bravery test that's coming, and it's possibly gonna make or break this this piece I'm working on. So, man, that's a lot of glare. Hold on, I just realized that. There we go. Is it easier to see that way, guys? Like, is it not? Because I didn't realize. I always forget how shiny that black is. I always forget how shiny that black ink is, and when you've got, yeah, I know, right? Me stall. When the lamp is sort of right on top of the, the page, it tends to glare a lot. So I didn't realize it was glaring that much. Hopefully, not as much now. Anyway. Yeah, big old bravery test. Don't make me go over there. This is gonna take a while, I think. I'm gonna try to make it as quick as possible, but you never know. But pretty much from the moment that I decided I wanted to do this, I had this idea in mind. Now, Lindsay knows her music. I'm not sure how familiar you might be with sort of British goth music, or if this would even qualify as British goth music. But I wanted to ask if you had ever heard Bauhaus before. Or any of you guys, really. Yeah, I figured you might. So I'm not... So Lindsay's not big on comic book stuff, but if I have a way to relate something to her, then I do. And in the case of Sandman and the main character of Sandman, who I'm drawing right now, Neil Gaiman actually conceived of Neil Gaiman along with Sam Keith and Mike Dragenberg and Dave McKean in the mid to late 80s sort of conceived of our main character here of Dream as being sort of resembling Peter Murphy, who was supposed who's the lead singer, I think, of for Bauhaus. And I got it right here, especially in the cover to the first issue of the comic. He's supposed to kind of vaguely resemble Peter Murphy. I've never seen what he looks like in real life. I probably should have looked that up at some point. But supposedly that's kind of what the idea was. Now what I'm doing here is something that I do a lot in a lot of different things in a lot of different artwork that I do, and that is masking. And I try to use drafting tape, which doesn't stick very much, which is easy to peel off without taking half of the surface of the paper with you most of the time. Still got to be kind of careful. See, like even there, because the page is still a little bit wet underneath from the ink, from the water, the surface is still a little damp, and it took a little bit of the ink off. Ordinarily I'd be upset by that, but I know what I'm about to do, and I know that that's probably not going to be very visible when I'm done. So for right now, I'm not sweating it too much. These are the parts that are not exactly riveting to watch all the time, necessarily. I think I'll throw this back in here. I think I can make that work. But the finished product usually ends up looking pretty great. Even if it takes a lot of planning. Okay. Not gonna do that then. Now, because when I start doing this, I tend to get carried away, and I don't want to get anything else on any other part of this over here. I'm gonna do this and mask up most of the rest of the surrounding areas here. That's funny. I had 4 viewers in here at some point, and I lost one, which just reinforces my my theory that nobody wants to come here and see me put tape on stuff. Palette. Paints. I'm going to move this to one side, and for everybody's own viewing pleasure, I'm going to mix these on camera, because otherwise you're just going to have a lot of dead air, and you might as well have something entertaining happening, even if it's not painting. This is how much I've used this paint. It's almost solid. But I'm stubborn, and I don't like to waste art supplies, so I'm bound and determined to squeeze every last drop out of that tube before I move on to a different one. At least for now. Now, what on earth is he doing, you might ask? We're gonna mix these up. We're gonna get 4 different colors, at least. That's my plan. That's my intention. This is another reason why I'm not a big fan of acrylic paints. Because you have to mix everything up ahead of time. I'll tilt this a little bit this way so you can see what the heck I'm doing. forgot I kept a bag underneath the table specifically for discarded supplies. And this is the last little component. Round sponge. And if I hadn't have found this yesterday, I wouldn't have been able to do this at all. And I would have been very upset. So let's see. Now I'll wet the sponge up just a little bit. Because I want it to react at least a little bit with the watercolor paint down here. Not much. And really, in the grand scheme of things, it may not even be perceptible. I just get to have fun with all of this. With all of this texture. And it feels like one is overpowering the rest. You grab another color and you go over it. I'm gonna dry this off a little bit. So you guys know what's coming. Okay. Yeah, if only hair dryers were actually that quiet. Yeah, if every hair dryer had a mute button, we'd all be a lot happier, right? So now that's dry. So now I can go back over it, right? Now, yeah, I meant to do that. Mix a little bit more. Get a lighter shade in here. I think I'm ready to see what that looks like without the tape, and then go over it a little bit more without. Now this is very light, very repositionable type tape, but that doesn't still mean that you don't. That doesn't mean that you don't still have to be careful with it. See right there? Took a little bit more with it. Now ordinarily, I'd have a much better blade with me than this. That's the one thing I forgot. I think it's going to be a common trend with all of these streams that there's always going to be at least one thing that I need that I'll have forgotten to have within arm's reach. In this case, it was a proper X-Acto knife, but this did the job fairly well enough. And now I can go back and do a little bit of this, and now it doesn't look entirely like it was stenciled or masked. And you can, if you got a sponge like this, you can turn it. You can sort of squeeze it to create your own shapes and your own different points of contact as it's coming down on your surface. So you get these little outlier patterns like this. And every so often you just come back and do something like this. And you keep turning the sponge so that it doesn't look like the same point of contact over and over again. And ideally, what I'm doing down here eventually starts blending back up into this color. Now I like that. I'm not too sure about that. That looks a little bit too much, too one color-ish. Up here. That's more like it. Am I overdoing it with this? Well, maybe. But it's my stream and I'll overdo it if I want to. Now, once I get the other pad that I'm, waiting on the order from, I'm probably gonna do another Sandman piece, and it's gonna be bigger. It's gonna have at least one more endless sibling. Let that dry a little bit. Yeah, that works. It's a little artistic license like everything else, but it still works. Let's work on lightening these areas up though, or at least brightening them. I'm still not too satisfied with how this is coming out. I think it needs to glow a little bit more, one way or another. Stuff out of here. Let's try something else. This is another gamble, but it's a calculated one, and if it ends up not looking right, how did that get up there? If it ends up not looking right, I can always black it back out, but I guess I might as well unleash the second webcam anyway. It's here for a reason, isn't it? Also, none of you guys have seen my Sandman t-shirt yet, so it's not exactly where I got the idea for this from, but it's one of my favorite shirts. And it occurred to me that one way that I would have an incentive to actually turn on the face cam, which I'm still a little bit reluctant to do, is is that it also gives me an excuse to, you know, wear all my comic book t-shirts that I haven't been able to wear. In over a year, either because of the lockdown or because they had been in storage. Hold on. There we go. Now, in the comic, Morpheus has Morpheus has eyes that resemble stars. I'm gonna attempt to recreate something like that, but it may not. Nope, that worked, sort of. Not quite what I'm going for. The thing is to get as much white paint in there as possible and then drag it out before it all dries. Also, not to dip your fingers in wet acrylic paint. That's what I was mostly kind of sort of going for. Now, add one last thing here. Well, maybe not one last thing, but one thing. And that is sort of turn the corners up and give Morpheus sort of a slight smirk on his face. Morpheus is a character who generally takes very little joy in anything, except maybe what he does. His function. As the Lord of Dreams. I'm going to even out this paint a little bit. To do that, I got to dry the sponge, which I had already soaked in water so that the paint wouldn't dry on it. And I hope that doesn't create problems here. And it doesn't look like it will if I can get to it in time and get my damn fingerprint off of it. Now, gonna have to dry that and then go back over it, so that may be an after the stream sort of thing. Unless you guys don't mind me running the damn hairdryer again. Let's see. Tell you what, you guys talk amongst yourself for just a minute. I'm gonna take a very quick break. I'm going to dry the sponge, I'm going to wash it off, I'm going to get a beer, and then I'm going to be back and we're going to finish this. Not necessarily in that order. Yes, thank you all so much for supporting my drinking. Where was I? Nope. There we go. Okay. Yeah, I didn't want to wait too long to fix this part up because it was really bothering me. It's another instance where I would have been yelling a lot of profanity if I had been on my own and realized that I had stuck my finger in that spot of wet paint. Trying to be better, trying to be more professional. Yeah. A bit more weight up here. That's the stuff. Do something similar another time. I'm gonna dry this. I think we're ready to bring it home. I am almost done, Will. Hopefully the cats will not overthrow you in the next like 5 to 10 minutes. But I give you my word, I am basically finished. I just want this bottom part dry. Yeah, I told you that hairdryer was good in the clutch. Especially if I'm trying to save you from your cats turning on you. I'm a little surprised. I'm a little surprised this actually took less time than it did on Tuesday. But then again, I think I'm a little bit more together than I was on Tuesday. At least I'd like to think that. Anyway. Thanks again for being here, guys. It means a lot to me, especially in these early days when the audience is small and still getting the word out. Hopefully this is just the beginning, as I said, and that things are going to get even more interesting, even more better. I will continue to pull out all the stops to experiment with all of these different fun things that hopefully you'll all come to enjoy. I will be back in 2 days. On Saturday, I will be back with my new sketchbook. For Sketchbook Saturday. Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm not sure, once again, I'm not sure what exactly I'm going to be drawing. It's going to... actually, I have a pretty good idea, if I'm being honest. It's probably going to be, because I have said previously, I have taken to starting and ending all of my sketchbooks with Spider-Man sketches, so we'll probably got one more day of Spider-Man. Boy, that was a really poor choice of words. And if you're a Spider-Man fan, you know exactly why. We're probably gonna do one more Spider-Man piece on Saturday. After that, who knows? But in the meantime, I did want to do something kind of completely different, and hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope anybody else that watches this later on enjoys this, and I hope to see you guys very soon. Again, tell your friends, tell your friends' friends, tell anybody who's got a computer and an internet connection. We're on Twitch and we're drawing. I'll get back to you on that in a minute, Will. Until then, I will see you again soon. Never stop making friends through art. And all of you guys, stay safe, laugh hard, ride fast, be kind.